Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I have read and accept the terms and conditions. Looks familiar, very familiar. Probably you saw it today morning, last night, this week, sometime, and you clicked on it without. You're not sure when you clicked what you're getting into. But probably you clicked on it because there was a question in your mind. There was a fear, the fear of missing out, and you said, yeah, let me go ahead and click it. We all are users of internet, data, and we all do it all the time. But as we will be overwhelmed with data, breaches of internet privacy, what's going to happen is this question, whether I've missed out something, is going to be replaced by other questions. And what would those questions be? Those questions could be, am I being robbed? Is anybody watching me? Or why should I even click on it? What's in it for me? So these questions are becoming more relevant. And as Google, who is one of the major players in data industry, we need to address them well in time before these are practical, relevant in everyday life. So Angelo, why don't you help us share the agenda today and take it forward from you?
Sure. So let me walk through the executive summary. So every click you make, I will sure about it. Now, we came here to give you a recommendation. Google should grow the users' data privacy awareness in order to construct, to build sustainable, long-term, profitable also, and innovative business. Why is this? We think that Google has a huge opportunity in making an ethical impact, and also it can be a leader by example towards the other companies in order to make an impact. And also there is a possibility to gain the users' trust, because users, they often don't want to share their data. But if we do it in an ethical way, meaning if we are open and we tell the truth to our users, we can gain their trust. And also the benefits are not just for Google and the users, it's also for companies and also for regulators. Now, as you may have seen already, I will just give you some news headlines that talk about Google. So this is the reputation on Google when we talk about data privacy. Just a few of them. Google knows too much about you. CNN. Google loses data as lightning strikes. BBC. Mac rumors. Google Home speaker criticized for spreading fake news. Fake news also is a problem because it makes lose the user's trust. So we want to give you a very, very practical example. What happened to us? So knowing that we were coming to California and preparing also for this presentation to you today in Mountain View, we were reading online newspapers in order to get more information about privacy and how Google manages it. But what appears in this screen, this is a real actually screenshot of our computer. Suddenly, this advertising comes up. This is an advertising from Airbnb telling us that apartment in Los Angeles had a special price for us. So suddenly, what we thought about, how do they know that we are going to Los Angeles? Who told them? And also, it's even in Italian, my native language, so it even knows that I speak Italian and that also I'm Italian. How come? So fear. The very first thing I said, somebody's spying me. But then I realized, actually, we went through Airbnb in Prasad a few days before to search for an apartment in order to spend these days in Los Angeles and in California. So this is an advertising targeting us. So somebody took our data to give us this advertising, and we don't know how. So this is a very practical. We were doing our research on the internet. This is an advertising of Airbnb Los Angeles for us. He knew where we were going, he knew that I'm Italian and I speak Italian, Ukrainian. So just to quick say about the situation of Google. Advertising blocking, it's a big problem for Google because it's an emerging competitor. They let stop the advertising for users. and it made lost 6.6 billion for in revenues for Google. Also, the advertising market, it gets very ineffective. 54% are not viewed at all by the users. So there are some good signs like the EU's legislation about right to be forgotten and the fact check about Google that avoids to have fake news on the internet, but still this is not enough. So this is why we are here today, to give you a further solution. The key question is, can Google create sustainable business using its like great potential of data gathering in order to create a sustainable business and also respect, on the other hand, the user's privacy? According to us, the answer is yes. We will explain to you why. And also, for us, Google has a central place. It's a data collection. On one side, we have the business customers who wants data from the users, private users, like all of us. When I say users, it means all the people who surf the net and who are on the internet, us, basically. So Google has to pass valuable information to private users, but on the other side, we have us users that also must be respected, because there is a respect of privacy, of their privacy. So Google has to engage on both sides. Now I pass it to Prasad to start our recommendation.
Thank you, Angelo. The understanding is, can Google do something about it? Yes, we feel Google can do something about it. It can revolutionize the data industry. It can democratize the data which is available. And possibly, how could it do it? It could do it by establishing a global rating framework for data industry, like all other industries have it. And what are we saying here? We will get into the details as we move forward, but the important part we felt was all the three key stakeholders in this case need to be considered. These key stakeholders are users like you and me sitting in this place right now. Then there are industries who use this data, industries which are into internet like Google, and industries which use the data, the output from these industries. And there are authorities who make rules and regulations. But each of these stakeholders have individual concerns. One of the major concerns from the user's point of view is it transparent enough for me to trust it? From the industry, they want more data, so data needs to be beneficial, it should be available to them, so it is beneficial to the users. So it should be a mutual sharing of data, where both the parties, the users and the industry, are benefited. And then we are saying this framework should include all the three key stakeholders, like the users, industry, and authority. So this is a broad framework right now we're setting up. Okay, when I said the first thing, data revolution, does it actually happen? Or is it another buzzword of big data which is coming, which I'm throwing here? Certainly not. In 2016, $130 billion of revenue was earned by some of the major industries. If you just look at these 6 industries, and just consider banking for the sake. Around 15 billion of additional revenue was added to banking, but just exploiting what data was available about the users. Are there opportunities? Yes. There are tremendous possibilities for growth. Access to exact information at right time. Something known as precision agriculture is taking place, by which countries in Africa can really become a powerhouse for agricultural production. More effective ways to operate. We all experience it in the form of Uber and Airbnb already. Rise of innovative business models. We don't know tomorrow what business model would come by and just wipe out, the existing business model which existed for so many decades. Highly personalized services. Yeah. When we go to Netflix, they already know what kind of TV shows we like. When we go to Amazon, they already recommend the books which are available. And increasing returns from the existing offerings. One more thing which this framework would help us is maintaining a free competition environment. When we say that let players compete amongst themselves instead of establishing an oligopoly. So what happens when very few organizations have this data with them? They're not going to be fair, because that's their competitive advantage. They want to exploit it. So they're going to control the data, and they're going to focus on short-term results, because that's how they will increase their numbers. That's how they are going to make profits. But at the same time, from users' point of view, what's going to happen is they're going to have lack of alternatives, because there are these few organizations which have control over this data. And unfortunately, they can't switch out of this option. It's something like, if I want to change my Gmail ID, I will, because my friends know Gmail ID of mine. Now, unless and until there's another alternative available, I would never switch my email ID so often. But this is leading to one more important risk, or I would say a loss-loss situation in this scenario, where there are a number of organizations which have small proprietary data. This data is not connected. Each of them has to reinvent the wheel. It's like if someone has my financial data and they don't have my consumer consumption data. So they have to go back and then again research about me to get that. That's reinventing the wheel every time. What's going to happen as a lot of organizations approach me? Probably for 10 times I would share the data very openly, but on the 11th time I would say, enough of this. I would not share my data because it's all over the place. I would retract back from sharing my data. And obviously the world would face something which is low innovation because there are only few organizations who would control this. This would be one of the important inputs. One more interesting thing when we working on this, we came across was there is a wide gap in perception of users and what organizations feel about data. From a customer point of view, data usage practices, notifications, and permissions are important. From company's point of view, internal policies. So they're more focused on what compliance measures we could take. It isn't about the final benefit to the user. It's more about, okay, this is the compliant measure we follow. Are my employees following it? If they're following it, I'm good enough. That's enough for me. But surprisingly, when we looked at some research done by BCG recently, interesting facts came up. The companies feel that most of the users are aware of data policies, the data privacy. But when you actually go and talk to the users, even 10% have really understood what the data is used for. There's a huge gap. They are not even aware of what kind of data is collected from them. So this becomes an ethical issue where someone says, this is right because I'm doing it in a particular way, and there's another person who's saying this is right because I'm doing it in a particular way. And both of them are not agreeing because the companies feel that the user just doesn't understand, he's not aware, so I can exploit him because I'm doing it in a right way. And they show the compliance to them saying that, okay, you're doing it. Unlimited controls on data exploitation. What's going to happen is users, like we discussed, are going to have violations of privacy, increase in awareness, and businesses want more valuable data. This is somewhere going to cause crossing of the comfort zone line. And what happens to Google here? Google is standing exactly at the center of this line, and which side does it go? That's the ethical dilemma which Google faces. There's a conflict of interest from its users, and at the same time from its customers. Users, where they feel trust, security of data, negative publicity, all that matters. And above all, there could be a backlash from the users. They would just move away from it. And from consumers, there could be a loss of revenue if Google doesn't agree to give them data. What happens? There's some other alternative they would go to, but this practice won't stop. So this is an ethical issue which Google faces right now. If we say there aren't any implications, and we say we don't care about users, we are making a big mistake. There were data breaches which happened in recent few years. And when a survey was taken about this, we realized that out of 100, maybe not everyone was interested in talking about this, but 20% people who looked into this actually reduced their spending, even if they needed to. Something like they needed to pay a bank, or they needed to pay an insurance agency. They reduced their spending by 30% in the first year itself. So that's a big hit. It's losing about 5 to 8% of revenues in the year one from those affected set of users. And as more and more users become aware about it, there are going to be financial implications. A lot of technological companies come out with products. And this fact can really slow down the product innovation and product launch cycle. Organizations depend on their current users to use their new products because they become their ambassadors. If these current users move away from the organization, what would happen is they have to go and look at new users. This would really increase the cost in terms of understanding what they want, and then increase the time frame. So this is the financial issue which we would address. Long-term implications. What would happen as data breaches increases, data privacy concerns increase, exploitations increase, and there's an emergence of data hoarding. There's pressure on authorities. They just would be pressurized by users like you and me, saying that what's wrong, why are you not doing anything about it? And as a result, they would react, and they would react in the form of stringent regulations. Just to give you an example about this, we can talk about EU data protection regulation. There are a few amendments which are still coming up in it, and I'll just discuss one particular thing. According to this new amendment which is suggested, they're saying that name of the person who signs in on a website is the data, and unless there is an explicit permission taken from that user, that data cannot be used. Now imagine if you say that this is my login ID, and if that is not explicitly permitted by you, organizations cannot use it. It's going to increase the cost of implementing everything, bringing out. It's going to threaten the viability of the whole business model, because every time you have to go back to the user for each information, like his occupational information, his age, every data point needs an explicit information and explicit permission. So stringent regulations are really going to hit hard. This is where legal issues will come in. So finally, what are we talking about? We're talking about recommendations with a framework. Angelo would explain in detail about this framework, how it's going to work.
Sure. So practically speaking, our recommendation has to relate to bring some standards and some ratings. What we want to do is to kind of do what other industries already are doing. For example, let's take into account, for example, hotels, restaurants, cars. These are all industries where users already rely on standards. If I have to buy a new car, I know the standards I want. There are like reviews. Also, if I want to go to a hotel, there are so many reviews, how many stars, and also there are ratings about those. But for data, this is not the case. And also, raw materials, energy, water, transportation, these are also industries where ratings exist already, but data, no. For data privacy, we don't know how the level of data privacy security that the users have on the internet. So for example, Google can set some parameters according to us. Whenever I'm in the internet, let me know if you're selling or not selling my data to someone. Let me know if there are something I should know proactively, not on demand. Let me know it. And also, whenever you ask me for some data, is this data going to have an impact only for the quality of service you're going to give me, or it's something you're going to sell to someone else to sell me again something in the future? To do, this is very important. Short term, find collaboration with EU and US. These are the two entities that are more advanced in privacy security according to us. Engage with strategic partners such as Amazon and Facebook, Apple, because again, it's not just Google. We want to make Google the leaders of an association, to give, again, an example, and also stimulate open competition. And again, this is because we want to open access, because the more data you have, the more users trust you, the more data you're gonna have. And by having data, you're gonna have better products, better services, a better world. Let's see the global ratings that we practically propose you. So this is probably what Google is gonna have. This is the search engine. You input a name, whatever you search, all the results will have, as you can see here, a grading system. This is the standard we want to bring. From 1 to 3, from 0 to 3. Let's say 3, that's an excellent quality of data privacy management. It's gonna be seen here. This is just by chance. We chose Facebook, for example. We gave a number 3. Probably it's not number 3, but we just give it as an example. And also, there will be a description. In this case, compliance with Google Data Framework not verified. This is TripAdvisor here. So basically, we're going to have a system that goes from 0 to 3. Compliant, partially compliant, compliance not verified, not compliant. From the best to the worst. All the sites will be judged. And also, going back to our example, also on the ads, we suggest to have a question mark near the advertising. So whenever I want to know more why this advertising is showing, I will click on it, and I will know why I'm having this advertising. how did you get this data from? And also, how did you have money from this data? How did you get it? Did you pay money? Did you sell it to someone? So all this information is something that the user will start to know about. So again, the realization of full value of data is the key. It will impact users and companies and regulators. And again, we don't want a data glut. So we want data to be shared. So we don't have to scare users. We have to encourage users to share the data. So Prasad, why don't you describe us the data glut?
Thank you, Angelo. Interestingly, in 1930s, when the Great Depression happened in the US, one of the reasons which was later analyzed and said it was because of the savings glut, a term coined by Federal Reserve Chairman Mr. Greenspan. And today we stand in a similar situation in terms of data. We could be called it data glut. The term is already coined by a professor at University of San Diego. So what do we mean by data glut? Data glut means users does not share his information because he feels insecure about it. It's like not investing because I feel insecure about the money may just not come back to me once I put it in a bank or some other investing firm. So I'm going to hold my data. I'm not, but rationally I'm fine because as an individual I'm worried about my data. But on a larger level, it's going to hurt the businesses which are based on this data, or businesses which look at establishing model based on the collective data of the individuals. So the question then arises, does it really exist when we're talking about this? Yeah, the data glut does exist. And it came out in one of the research which was done, not now, in 2013, where individuals are in different countries, so developed as well as emerging countries, individuals are asked, would they share the data if they knew the purpose of why the data was shared? So they said, yeah, if we were transparently told about why or how our data would be used, then probably we would share much more data. So the percentage went, in terms of sharing the data, went up from 37% global to 54% global average. That means it's just that matter of faith which prevents from sharing of this 5 times of data. Once this is implemented, taking care of data glut, the next part is implementation. But there are a few basic steps which we need to take. The first would be consolidate users' data together. Probably something like we have Fort Knox for storing code. We need data for data storage systems in probably every country or every continent where we're going to hold this data together, but which is accessible to various agencies who are a part of this consortium. Then we would have standardized application program interfaces and protocols, so that data collection is more of uniformity. So data can be exchanged much easily rather than everyone collects it in a different way and then it's more inefficient when sharing it. Then we're looking at simple, transparent user interfaces to change access permissions. Most of the time we won't change the setting of Facebook because we find it inconvenient to go and change the setting. We find it troublesome. Maybe it's designed that way, but then we need to simplify this so that users can actually go and maybe in a couple of clicks just avoid the access to their personal information. So we decided to implement this in 3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And we looked at we divided in terms of the economy. We looked at emerging economies before. There were reasons for it, where because they're still growing, the policies are not clear, it would be easy to implement, the governments are more cooperative. Phase 2, we would look at small city states like Singapore, Hong Kong, where the geographies are limited, and A/B testing can be done much easily, where you would know the results immediately and you can change easily. The data storage is much simpler. And then phase 3, we would look at developed countries. That's because there are already some problems existing. There is trust factor. Look at the opportunity which is exists.
Okay, so thank you. And just let's see this data. 2020, crucial year for Google. 4 billion connected people, 4 trillion revenue opportunity, and let's look also the last one, 60 trillion gigabyte in usage. This is what we have on the table, and let's look at the financial. 2019, last column, the revenue will be even growing every year, but let's say that advertising blockers will impact the revenue, but still, we will still have a profit. And again, if Google, if you are going to let's say, engage in our solution, we ensure that this global rating solution will allow to have this profitable mark there in the red, in green. So again, concluding, again, Google, the recommendation that we give to Google is to grow users' data privacy awareness, because it has a big opportunity, can lead by example, as we said. We have to gain users' trust, because that's the key, and we're going to benefit users, companies, and regulators. This is because we want to organize the world in a better world, and also with an open access of data, we think that we can be even more innovative, better products, better services. More data can allow you to have sustainable business and still profitable. So we thank you for your attention, but before the Q&A, just a few seconds, if Prasad, you can show them the video. We found this very, actually, funny video. You're from Google, so it's not making fun of Google, so don't be offended. But it's about everything people make on the internet. Thank you very much. This was our presentation. We also thought of singing, but we realized that we are not good enough. So thank you very much. Piano, yeah, piano, yeah. Maybe I could. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I'll start off the questioning and then turn it over to our judges. But let me play within the role myself. It seems like what you're recommending for us to think about is something that we've thought about ourselves quite a bit. And one of the reasons we've invited you here to help us think this through is because we've already started thinking about it, and we know that you all are one of the leading consulting groups on this issue. I'd like for you to go a little bit deeper for our own benefit into a couple of things. One is, you're talking about setting up a global rating system. I take it you don't want us to do that alone, because if we did it alone, then it would seem self-serving. I mean, and you mentioned partnering with competitors to bring them into this. Would there be a sort of outside, independent group that would oversee this rating system so that people would feel comfortable that there was objectivity and transparency in the rating system? I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, so correct. Like Google is not the only one to rate, because of course Google rates is not credible. So we suggest Google in relying on third parties, let's say neutral parties, because that's the key. Who is gonna give the ratings? Who is gonna give the standards? Of course, if there is only one party, then you can, of course, say the users might protest, saying, "Oh, of course, if this is the only, if Google is rating itself, let's say with a top 3 and let's say having the standard, having at the maximum 3 excellent privacy management, it's not credible." So from the very beginning, we have to make actually very clear who are the stakeholders participating in this. We can suggest for Google, but we are also very keen on listening to what Google thinks. What about engaging third parties that can have different environments involved, also different industries? But of course, those cannot often be related to business environment, because we also want to make sure that there is not a profit as a basis. For example, there can be professors, there can be specialists in, for example, data mining, and also we thought that also by the experience of users, even the simple users can rate by giving reviewing. What happened, for example, in booking? In booking, whenever you book a hotel and then you stay in a hotel, it's actually the users who rates the hotel, because, okay, probably the next customer that will come will not know personally the customer who stayed at the hotel. But of course, if the more review we have, probably the credibility of the rating will also be strong. So let's say academics, people from business, and also users. Probably users will be the biggest part of the pie.
So it would be some kind of group that would be put together, a diverse
Yes, exactly.
group
Exactly.
that would be overseeing this rating system.
Yes, exactly. We know that usually the users are keen on make it clear when, especially when they had a very bad experience, because this is human. Usually, when you have a bad experience, you want to protest, you want to show on the internet that you had a very bad experience. Usually, you're not very keen when you had a good experience. But we'll try our best to encourage all the users who had good and bad experience in data privacy to give their comment.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
I have a question for you. You were going to begin this program, the rollout was going to begin in the developing world, correct?
Yes.
And how are you going to reconcile that with the potentials for corruption and for false ratings, if you will? Or the ability of the Russians perhaps to hack in and create their own ratings?
Yeah. So when we say we're beginning with the developing world, this is exactly one of the reasons why we would actually want to go to the emerging economies, because the policies are very unclear. If we say that these people are not using data, it would be incorrect completely, because we have a lot of, there are more than, many million users who are still in Africa, India, China, and those places. But what happens is, currently there are no transparent policies. The government, when government takes steps in these economies, it is seen as a, how would we say, interrupting the freedom of speech or freedom of expression. So when a player like Google comes in and says, this is what we bring to the table, then probably the regulators can let go of this particular role of censorship and then rely on this. Like you said, there is a chance of that, some people in these emerging economies may use it for corruption or misleading the population as a whole in that economy. But then when we have, that's where the partnerships among these organizations like Google or Facebook or Amazon, as you suggested, comes in place, because that is where technology lies. Yeah, there are going to be miscreants who are going to ensure that this does not work. But then that's something which we'll have to ensure security.
Now, we are certainly, not to pat ourselves on the back, we are the greatest company in this space, correct? How do you imagine us dealing with the stakeholders in governments, both in the EU and in America, where we're seeing tremendous political flux at this time?
Yeah.
Particularly the question of whether the right-wing leadership in various countries will not really care about privacy of the constituents and not put emphasis on this.
I think your question is very interesting, and that's where we had to divide it based on economies. We would have said, just do it for the countries in developed economies first, because it's more easy, the users are more aware, but then we said we should start with emerging economies where policies are not clear. When we talk about emerging economies and where right-wing would not support, but at the same time, data is emerging as such a powerful source of economic advantage in these countries. it is helping them to rather bring those developmental plans much more faster, reach out to those constituents much faster. So right now, instead of misusing it, that's probably would be an idea which would come to them after a couple of years or 3 years. Right now they're looking at how they could exploit the right usage of it in terms of reaching the people. Even I think here in developed economies it is being used in the form of all the social media, where people underestimated the use of social media for certain bigger events like elections, but then it worked out differently. I think that is where some I wouldn't say intelligent or non-intelligent or right or wrong, but then some people exploited it. That's a fact, and it worked in their favor.
In more specific terms, are you going to recommend that we create almost a parallel to the United States State Department for diplomatic ventures? Google almost as a nation state of its own, engaging with the
we would want to keep it as neutral as possible, so that there is less interference by any of the political or countries.
On our end, are we going to create a division inside of Google to lobby in these various countries? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we would definitely look at ways of bringing a lot of countries on board, because without that, the success won't. We won't have success. Because regulators form an important part of this. Regulators can go the other way by bringing in stringent laws and saying that this is not going to happen, but then at the same time, if they are on board, I think it works more effectively. And for them it is an advantage where they just can let go of things of where they have to interfere on those and micromanage, when they know that there's a fair system. I think everyone wants fairness unless and until they feel that it is not going to be used against them.
We need to move on because we have other judges with questions. At least I think we have other judges with questions.
Sure do.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So, what assumptions, if any, did you make in your presentation?
Yes. So maybe I can start with the, let's say, more quantitative financial assumption. For example, if one of the assumptions was, okay, let's start with the quantitative. So let's say we think that this is the right time to do it, and Google is the right company to engage because we see this, meaning that we believe in these stats. So if we talk about connected people, 4 billion, 4 trillion revenue opportunity, 60 trillion gigabyte usage, why not to engage even more on ethics, on data privacy, for example, avoiding, for example, fake news, and so on, to gain the trust. I think this is the perfect, actually, environment. When you have a problem and an encouraging market, then it's the right time, for example, to bring on new solution, as I recommended. For example, a global rating system, for example, to help the users. Also, in the financials, we estimated that these global framework ratings, where we rate from 0 to 3 every site, will cost from 150 million to $1 billion US, because this is actually how much the I'm Feeling Lucky solution, which was an algorithm that Google used in the search engine, costed 110 million, but we estimated that as a benchmark to bring a cost from 150 million to $1 billion US. This is another assumption, because we don't know exactly how this can cost, because we don't know also the engagement of Google, how far it want to go on the data management. But we think that this is a good, let's say, stream, 150 million, $1 billion US. So these are probably the two main assumptions we did in our presentation. Yes, please.
If I could just add to Angelo, on the higher side, we looked at a lot of positive aspects of how data can be exploited. There were at least 6 industry segments we looked at. We have the slides for that.
Yeah.
How the revenues for each particular industry segment would go up. We kind of looked at some research material published. So we looked at different industries. How in transportation it would help if data was shared, in healthcare, in oil and gas, consumer products. These were like random industries which we picked up just to find out how much it would impact if you have such an open system where data was shared. So this is one of the reasons why it became more appealing to bring up such a kind of structure or framework.
I have another financial side of this question to follow up what Scott said. What's our exposure if this fails?
Okay. Yeah, so actually this is a good question because it's very difficult, first of all, to estimate because there is not an exact, let's say, amount, but again, we think that, let's start with the profitability in 2019, because we think, first of all, that this global framework will take some time to be stimulated, especially on users to run, because I have to say one thing. In order to make this happen, the rating system, the users must be engaged, first of all. And to make the users engaged, it takes time. So now we are 2017. We estimate that 2019 can be the good benchmark year that this global rating system can be run. And here, we think that if things is not going in the right way, or Google decides not to engage in this opportunity to save data privacy, this profit probably will disappear, because so it's about 11 billion US dollar disappearing. This is because mostly at the same time advertising blocking, which blocks all advertising, which most of the revenues for Google come from, will be even growing. So we expect the year coming, this green file growing if the solution will go. But if the solution doesn't go, or we don't engage in the solution, we will never have these green profits. So meaning that we will be over, let's say, subordinated to the advertising blocking market. So basically, I'm saying that we will not, Google risk not to have profit. This is the reality we see.
Are you saying that if we don't do this, we won't see profit?
Probably not, because we also expect at the same time that ad blocking, which is a big loss in revenue for Google, will probably go on after 2019 and probably will be covering all the net income of Google.
I'm looking at ethical issues. Okay? When you said going to revolutionize the data industry, and there's transparency versus privacy, I did not hear the word security in any measure at all. Where does that belong?
You should this line.
Because I know at one time IBM related security and privacy together. Now they're separate. And they do have conferences, worldwide conferences for people dealing with just security of information. Do you foresee that we start, Google being the leader, to organize something similar to the GS Summit? We started with 7 countries dealing with worldwide financials. Now it's 20. I think it's happening in June or July. Do you foresee Google being the leader to organize such an organization?
Definitely, ma'am. We feel that this would be one of the ways it would progress, where different countries would participate, different organizations would participate, because the cost of data breach comes from each individual user, even if we say we have to take care of the security. Because finally, it's like that cost which of the user data collected is somewhere recovered from the users itself. That can be the form of the sale of the data, which we practically come to know. So the more data security comes in, it helps. Here when we recommended one particular thing, one of the users' concern for Google was the security of data, which we considered. And secondly, when we say that framework begins, we said that first is consolidating the data and ensuring that it is kept in one particular location to a maximum extent. So probably a storage in one particular country. The reason of that being, like we mentioned, it was similar to Fort Knox, where all the gold is stored in one place, is because it becomes easy to manage it. It's more spread. It becomes more difficult to efficiently and cost-effective manner manage it. To give you an example, we also have few industries which are actually doing it without breaching onto privacy, but in a very effective way, in a very open manner, using this data and serving the customers as well. So there were 3 examples which we considered and compared. One was simple thing like Disneyland. When we go there, we have all magic bands in our hand. That means there's a data being collected of ours. They have vast data. What do? They actually just find out where the customers go every time, what do they eat, or how much time are they spending. That's not to breach your privacy of knowing where you went. It's just to find out that how we can efficiently help you. Second is organization newspaper, rather economic newspaper, Mint, where it shares data openly, but only a couple of data points like name of the individual and what is the occupation of an individual. 2 only investing firms which would be helpful in creating some wealth for them. But then against that we have something like Facebook, which aggressively goes and seeks data from people. So it varies in terms of the parameters we would have, the benefits to the customer from the benefits to the company, and at the same time how sensitive the data is and how the sensitivity increases. So these are the parameters which each data point which will be collected would be part of the rating, and that rating would reflect that in a way. So this is a small framework which we put across.
Just in this room, I see people span across different cultures. And do you see establishing, advise you to establish different guidelines for different cultures? Is that workable, possible, is it applicable, necessary?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I can also say
Because you mentioned, they know you speak Italian. You have Italian, Japanese, English, French,
Yes.
the 4 languages there, I know.
yes,
Right.
and as I said, I mean, let's say this, that I think no matter what a culture, first of all, if you see an advertising, as we said, knowing what language you speak and where are you going in the next days, no matter the culture, probably you start to be fear that you're spied. And I think all the cultures, wherever you come from, if you're spied, I don't think it's a good sign. So as you said, probably in the future G7 summit, we'll have a crossing line. Do we want to go towards the companies that ask for our data, or we going to go towards the users respecting their data? So this is, yes?
No, you finish your
Yes.
comment, but I have a question.
Okay, so there's a crossing line which is ethical. We want to know, probably in the future G8 summit, probably this will be also the questions, because we know that in the US, for example, there is more probably availability in encouraging the companies now in this moment. But still, we think that this is, no matter the culture, probably the biggest crossing line, the ethical crossing line, going towards the users, respecting their data, or going to the companies and give them data. So Google, I think, has this role globally, since it's a global player.
As a group of executive directors, we now have the responsibility to move this up the hierarchy within Google and talk to decision makers above us. But I'm convinced. But could you give us the first 3 steps that we should take as a company to put this plan into motion? The first 3 steps.
Yes, I'll show it to you. So first of all, is engaging.
No, don't show me a slide.
Okay.
Just tell me.
Okay, the EU and US regulators, I think we have to see them more as a friend rather than enemies, even though we also discussed before that there can be corruption or interests, but still, we have to deal with them. So I think in the short term, this is the first thing. Engage the partners which are in the industry, even if they might be
Our
competitors.
competitors.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
That might not be so easy.
That might not be easy, but we think that also them can actually be profitable on that. But we think, let's be honest in this room, we are Google, we are the number 1, and we can even have a better competitive advantage if we are going to create more transparency in data usage. And the third one is to stimulate the open competition, because if
I'm
we
sorry, I didn't hear you.
stimulate open competition, meaning that the companies will kind of have a competition on who is the cleaner one, who is managing the data in a cleaner way. The reputation, for example, of brands, of companies is still very important to make an edge, so to make a competitive advantage. We don't want regulators to put so many rules in order to respect privacy. We want privacy issue to be solved in a business way. This is about ethics, but also we have to be somehow regulated also by economy laws, not just rules, political laws. So we think that naturally companies, the greatest companies will also rely on the cleanest ways of managing data.
Okay, thank you. We are out of time. But now we can talk to you without being in a role play. And so, judges, do you have some comments you'd like to make about this team? Or, you know, criticisms?
I do. I would just, I'm all about presentation. And so when I watched the video that Dr. White put together, I was very cognizant of the fact that for some reason the room is set up so that they can't stand on the left side of the slides, and I think it would be helpful if they did, because we read left to right. He also talks in the video about posture, where to put your hands, things like that. There is something in our promotional marketing business. Whenever we have a presentation, we tease people if they're assuming something called a fig leaf. And a fig leaf is what you're doing with your hands right now. So I just took some notes about it. Because it's a second language for both of you, and because I'm considerably older, I would have liked it to see you slow down a little bit so that I was sure to capture it. There's pauses in there, you can breathe. And the other thing is that when you're doing slides like this, I think Dr. White pointed this out very clearly as well. Do you want me to focus on you, or do you want me to focus on the slide? Because if you're going to put 14 things up there on that slide, then you're going to make me try to find where you are up there. And I lose track of what you're saying while I'm trying to find you up there. So those are things that I think would serve you well in the future in life and in business. I think I'll leave it there. But do you feel better now that it's over?
I feel the same, but thank you for the introduction.
Scott, did you have some comments? Scott?
It was the same as the kind of piggyback on Dave's comments, is just the slide, the content on the slides was so much. In some of them, particularly the quantitative, I mean, it was just a lot of numbers to try to take in, listen to you and read them, and so that was the only criticism. Is just a lot of information to take in, but otherwise, I thought it was good. Yeah.
Do you have any comments about the judges that you would like to find out?
On the judges?
Thank you.
No, I think when you point out about the difference of culture, no? The difference of culture, when you pointed out the difference of culture, I actually noticed that in this room probably we are from different culture, and actually I realized in that moment that when you talk about ethics, we can think about difference of culture because probably we are educated in different ways and different education systems. But I think when you talk about ethical problems, especially in the long run, you kind of share the same thoughts. So I felt like there's no much cultural difference in this, at least. So I felt like the judge, especially talking in particular with you, coming from Hong Kong, where we are from, we felt like a little bit home also. But yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. I read at the speed of light. I've seen so many presentations where the data, the underlying core of what this means as a business or the plan is presented in such abbreviated terms that without that substance, you just miss the impact of the solution or why this particular solution is being proposed. I thought this was one of the most thorough presentations I've ever seen. And so it was very data rich. I know that's an ironic phrase to use given the subject matter. I didn't see an enormous ethical dilemma here. You know, I think that because everything you were proposing was so logical, this presentation is so logical, it's not an appeal to pathos at all. It all made sense. And what I particularly liked about it is that you had a plan for implementation. And it was every part of this presentation was thought out in the greatest of details. I will tell you, I love the video. And I kept thinking back to a winning team a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, NYU. I would have led with the video and introduced with the video, not ended with it. I wanted the last words to be your words and not the video, but the video was very powerful. It was simple, it was clear, and it got to the point. So
I agree with Ruth, and I understand what Dave is saying. I understand what Scott is also saying about all the data. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. But given the fact that you had a limited amount of time, I thought you handled it very well. And I appreciated that you spoke clearly and relatively slowly so that we could understand. I also appreciated the fact that other than me, you gave everybody else hard copies of your presentation.
Yes.
I won't hold that against you because you say you're going to get me one.
Yes, I will.
But that's so important for a variety of reasons. I mean, what if all of a sudden you had technical difficulties with the computer? You know, then, I mean, this could happen in your consulting career or in your business career. Having a hard copy then allows you to say, well, I don't know quite what's going on here. We're hoping that somebody can check with you know, the technical people, but let's just take a look at the hard copy. So I appreciated that. I appreciated the fact that you introduced yourself to the committee, even came around and gave us your business card, shook hands, introduced yourself. Very, very professional, very good technique. I also agreed with Ruth that I thought your ethical part of it could have been strengthened. I wanted to say, okay, I mean, are you recommending that this group, that hopefully this group of partners / competitors, that you're going to try to get together to work on this for the benefit of users, for the benefit of customers, etc. You know, I wanted a little bit more about how that committee would get set up. You answered it, I thought, very well. But I wanted a little bit more of that, a little bit more pulling out of the ethical aspect. One of which, I mean, obviously the ethical aspect is that we don't know what's happening with our data. I mean, we as users, as consumers, or whatever, we're totally ignorant about this, or a lot of us are, me for sure. And a whole educational program really caught me, you know, you had me at the educational program. It's so important, it seems to me, to educate us as users as to, you know, what's going on. Whether giving us a choice also as to whether we want to opt in or opt out. I thought you could have brought that out a little bit. But you had me there. I really think that's important. And I think that is something you could convince a Google of. You know, you need to educate consumers. Be the educational leader in that regard. So I must say I appreciated your presentation. I know what Dave and Scott are saying, and I understand that. But it was so well done that I applaud you for that. And your presentation was well done. So, yeah.
And also you proposed sort of two levels of solutions. There was the institutional solution, but when you put up that slide with the 4 colors.
Yeah, the practical one.
The practical one, early on, very early on,